Welcome. I was a little bit off on that. All right. Resistance is futile. Like and subscribe. And that never gets old. Playing with that laser gives me a childlike giddiness that I have no real explanation for. I shouldn't get that much pleasure out of that, but I do. I don't know why. Welcome. It is Mysterious Forces Live once again, and it is Friday, June 14th, 2019. Welcome, my friends. I don't do too much promoting of one show ahead of another, so I hadn't really said anything. But make sure you tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow, Saturday night, the 15th, I'm going to have a panel, and it's going to be CW Chanter. It's going to be BB from the BB blog, and I'm looking for a third person. So I'm going to bring in a third person on that panel, and tomorrow we're going to get way into all the nasty Corey Good Twitter trash that's been going on, and the Unirock controversy, and we're just there's been a lot of mudslinging on Twitter. My Twitter feed is just blowing up with this stuff. And so we're going to get on here. We'll talk about it tomorrow. So if you're interested in the down and dirty on that stuff, tune in tomorrow night, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be quite the to-do. Without any further ado, last week we had a little bit of a miscommunication, and Dr. Hein was at a scientific conference. Or a science conference. I don't know if scientific conference is correct grammar. A science conference. And so we had a little bit of a miscommunication, and I talked about this topic as much as I could, but my untrained brain can only go so far and absorb so much of the concepts that I was reading about. So I'm so glad to have these two gentlemen on tonight. I have Dr. Simeon Hein and Buddy from Alien Protocols. And thank you, gentlemen. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having us, Natasha. Great to be here.
This is all in reference to, we were talking briefly before we went on air, and I thought that the article that came out in the New Scientist at newscientist.com in their space section, this story was published on the 5th of June of this year by Michael Brooks, and it's titled, "We've Seen Signs of a Mirror Image Universe That is Touching Our Own." And I kind of, in my own lame way, kind of talked about the findings and the implications last week, but I certainly did not do it justice. And I'm glad that I have you gentlemen here to really fill in all of the details on this and what the implications are. So you guys can take turns. I know you're used to working together. Just off the top of your head, what are the implications of this new information?
It could be so vast. It's very hard initially to frame that answer, because it could be as little as it's a mirror universe, and it says it does exactly what you do. So if you try and communicate with it, it's going to say the exact same thing you say to it back to you at the same time. So it's completely useless. But there could be, if you have ingenuity, able to do certain things. Like they have stated that it is bound by a neutron-positron exchange, meaning that in our universe it's neutron and there's its positron, and there's an exchange. And then when you think about it, if that's the connection between the two, that's the bond between the two. That's the thing that holds them both together. And if one wanted to communicate to yourself and send to yourself the exact same message at the exact same time, doing something completely meaningless, you could do that probably through some sort of exchange with the neutron positrons. So you'd go through all this laborious action to say, "Hi, me," and it would say that right back to you at the same exact moment. I mean, that's a supposition. There's a lot of scientists who have different angles on it, and there could be meaningful things you could do. For example, there might be a element in our universe and in theirs that has no extra value. But when you flip it, it may take on a little extra value in their world, and thus be a free energy source. So we could literally create a box, and a very small box that could kick out a tremendous amount of energy. So there's a lot of fascinating implications, and that means like there's us there doing the exact same thing at the exact same time, and that's a really intense notion. But I'm having a hard time with this one. Doc, how do you put this in a real world kind of context?
Yeah, I think, you really, this is really significant because it was just earlier this year that I had a physicist that works at one of the government labs around here in Boulder tell me that this is just philosophy, that the idea of a parallel universe is untestable, so that it's not in the realm of science. And I just want to let you know and the audience know, for decades, ever since this idea was proposed in 1957, the mainstream scientists, for the most part, have said it's untestable, therefore it's outside the realm of science, though it's been gaining popularity. And this is really interesting because if you look at the article, they go back to Li and Yang, who won the Nobel Prize for their particle research in 1957.
Yeah.
Parity violation, the idea that you're supposed to, in our universe, most particles that you see have mirror images, which means you could hold them up to a mirror and they perform exactly the same. It doesn't affect them to have mirror images.
And it's hard to get mirrors that small.
Right. But with the thing is, but you can measure the energy and so forth. But what Li and Yang found is that neutrons and neutrinos, which are sort of related to neutrons, they were missing the right-handed versions. We only had left-handed versions of neutrons and some neutrinos, to the best of my understanding of it. Yeah. And so what they said is this violates all of our understanding of the universe because everything else is symmetrical. And it works in reverse, and it's mirror image. But we can't find the missing neutrinos. And you know what they said back then? They said it had to be in another sector somewhere. Otherwise, the universe wouldn't make sense because everything else has the mirror image. So the right-handed neutrons have to be somewhere else. We don't know where they are, but in order for symmetry and conservation principles, which, by the way, started with Emmy Noether, a female German scientist that emigrated to the United States during, Hitler's persecution, which is when my dad came over too at the same time. She was one of the ultimate physicists that left Germany. And she even corrected Einstein because symmetry and conservation are so fundamental to our sense of physics. And Li and Yang said there has to be the other neutron somewhere. They didn't use the word parallel universe. It didn't exist back then. Another sector. And by the way, 1957 is also the year that Hugh Everett III creates the many worlds interpretation at Princeton. Mm-hmm. And his thesis advisor, the famed John Wheeler, who everyone has so much respect for and is in awe of with his ideas about gravity. He's a student of Niels Bohr. He didn't like it because he thought it would offend the Copenhagen people, including Niels Bohr, that parallel reality. So he made Hugh Everett rewrite it and take out all references to splitting and alternative reality. So in 1957, we have this idea, I think you can see this, Natasha and Buddy, of a genesis of a new idea. And it's repressed for a long time because no one can make sense of it. And even up until now, people said it's untestable until this article came out. And I found out looking at the research, and I think we've seen this with UFO research and other topics, that it's been there the whole time, but it's been neglected. There have been people proposing that there have to be a parallel mirror universe in order for this to make sense. But it wasn't until this article came out that we found out that the people at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, a laboratory with a funding of $1.4 billion a year, according to Wikipedia, these are pretty, mainstream physicists. And they're saying, look, one way out of this parity violation is there should be a mirror universe. The neutrons, the thing is with the neutrons is they're not lasting the correct amount of time. It depends. If you put a little energy into them with magnetic oscillations, they're disappearing 9 seconds earlier than if you just look at them the other way. And that 9 seconds is huge in physics. So Natasha, people thought this was experimental error. They just, how our minds work. We have to flatten it out and just push it away into the corner. The tic tacs, they're just noise in the radar system. They'll go away. See, this is how the human mind works, and this is what's been repressing science. But this experimental error didn't go away, and they're going to do new tests about it. But it suggests that one way out of this is, as Buddy said, a mirror parallel reality universe. 5 times more matter than our own. And one more thing to throw in the mixer while we're talking about this, Buddy. Dark matter.
Yes.
The thing that holds universes together, they shouldn't be holding together with the amount of matter we see, but there's more gravity around. These mirror neutrons, not the mirror neurons, the mirror neutrons. We talked about mirror neurons last time in the show, if I remember. Yep. The mirror neutrons would be creating gravity, and that's the only way you'd interact with them, through gravity. And it just happens to be that the amount that we're missing here is exactly the amount that you would need to create dark matter. And it would suggest that in this mirror universe, there's 5 times as many regular particles as we have here, and 1/5 the dark matter. It's inverse.
Well, it's a mirror.
What it means is, just what we're saying is, it's testable. It's finally something we can talk about with data, with theory, with tests. Buddy and I love evidence.
Doc, I have a problem, Doc.
Go ahead with it.
If it's a mirror universe and it has 5 times the matter, how can it be a mirror universe? There's like an extra cheeseburger in every room? I don't get it. How can you have 5 times? Isn't it a sliding equivalency where in that universe it's not perceived as any extra mass compared to ours? It's just kind of in an exchange rate. It seems that, like when I go to France, my money's worth less.
Well, okay, so buddy, it's a mirror universe. Did you ever go to one of those fun houses as a kid where you had the wavy mirrors and you didn't look the same size in the wavy mirror?
I grew up there and it made me look actually normal.
Right. So if you were thin, it made you look bigger, and if you are really big, it made you look thin. Remember those? That's the type of mirrors we're talking about here. We're not talking about a 1-to-1 symmetry, exact copies of you and me. We're talking about something that fits our universe like a puzzle piece, and there's 5 times as much stuff there.
Do you think
if you thought our universe was big, this one is really humongous, and I just hope they're friendly, because it suggests that we already could be interacting with them through neutrons. But Natasha, you kind of get the idea there. Am I explaining? I mean, I know you read the article pretty carefully. Does that sort of make sense? Go ahead, buddy.
I think there's a lot of ambiguity still here in this research, and I think a lot of questions that are crucial to this have not quite been answered yet. But the amount of evidence that's been presented so far is so compelling. It's worth coming out into the public and having other researchers dive in. And the implications are massive. You know, there's so many of those mysteries that Doc was talking about. You know, and symmetry has just been one. Supersymmetry has been one that's been so consistent at such a large magnitude that we would certainly expect this to fit in with that. And we're seeing, and even looking at postulates like white holes could be there. We've got, where's all the white holes that we've been, Einstein conjectured should be in this universe? And some people would say they happened earlier in our universe. And some people say, oh, it's going to happen later. But maybe they reside in a second. And it makes perfect sense because it goes, you know, from ours to theirs. I also have a big confusion over if it's a mirror universe, it should have exactly the same shapes in every room. You know, everything should be exact except for this kind of weight translation, but everything looks normal still, even with that 5 times matter.
No, so it's not that type of mirror, buddy. It's a funny mirror. You got to understand, we're talking about symmetry here. So it has
there's that distortion involved.
Exactly. It has to fit with, we have 5 times as much dark matter as regular matter, according to our understanding. And so this would be inverse of that, but a mirror version in that sense. Not a perfect, I guess what you would call it, isomorphic mirror. It's not perfectly 1-to-1, but it's matching our mathematics and our densities in a way that makes the whole thing complete, symmetrical.
So, are they allowed then to be vastly different from us, or would it just be a slight warping? Like you're saying, like the mirror.
The article suggests, the New Scientist article, again, folks, it's in my version online, it was June 8th, 2019. The researchers, and it's Leah Broussard, we should say Dr. Leah Broussard, and another researcher at the University of L'Aquila in Italy.
Wow.
Zara, his last name starts with a B, I'll find it in a sec. Well, they suggest in other researchers, it's a colder universe than ours. It has more matter, but it's colder than ours. So we're not thinking, but here's just the fact that they say in this article that there could be life forms there that are different than ours, adapted to a universe with a lot less gravity than we have here. From dark.
If I recall correctly, the fact, sorry, I just want to interject. Because I have questions and I don't want to get too far ahead without asking the questions. First of all, if I remember correctly, the premise was that this mirror universe, or this mirror image of forget it, I don't have a word for that. The cooler universe, I was getting tongue tied, it is what allowed 5 times more mass to slip into that universe because it was cooler and it allowed that channeling to happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, equilibrium must have. If it was cooler, it'd want to move over because temperature seeks equilibrium.
Heat moves.
Contained area. Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
That could be it. That could be it. It just would, again, whatever the reasons of why it occurred, and that could be why it has 5 times the mass, or it could be that the property of neutrinos, that these neutrinos slipped into this other parallel reality and disappeared from our view, except gravitationally. That both of them together make a complete symmetrical system. In other words, symmetry is restored.
Yes, I was thinking yin and yang. You have to have the yin in order to yang, and you have to have the substrate in order to have the superstrate in the other, and they can pair together that way.
They pair together and they restore symmetry. Now, we have to say this doesn't mean this is necessarily correct. It doesn't that scientists have seen this universe, but it's just that the evidence from particle physics is very hard to explain. Now, maybe something else will come up and it won't be what we thought it was, but it's just very interesting at this point. There's actually a way to test this because there are tests underway now, and I believe some of them have already been completed, but the data hasn't been analyzed with neutrons, with using various magnetic fields in the mirror with mirrors to see if you're getting this beta decay. It's called beta asymmetry decay. I looked at Leah Broussard is on ResearchGate, where I have some of my articles published too. So I was able to look at her articles. It's called beta decay, beta asymmetry, and I'm interested. It's interesting just that this popped up into my field of view. I mean, I've been looking at multiverses for a couple of years now, and some of my presentations, even at this science meeting that kind of sort of interfered with our broadcast last week, Natasha. It was, is there evidence for a multiverse? And before this article, there wasn't. This article kind of quintupled the amount of evidence I have. Before, I was looking at things like multiple personality syndrome and physical changes in people that happen very quickly when they change personalities, diseases, eye color, wounds, and things that are almost impossible to explain any other way than parallel realities. And fractals, something that Buddy and I have talked about a lot at small scales, that there's no explanation why you get fractal patterns unless you can imagine forces coming in from many different directions at subatomic levels from parallel realities. So that was the sort of evidence I was looking at, is fractals at subatomic levels and really rapid physical changes in people with multiple personality syndrome. I've spoken to people that have treated people with multiple personality disorders, for lack of a better word, and they've seen it themselves. People who've changed temperatures very quickly from fever to no fever back to fever, and that's very hard to explain from any other point of view, except that there's a parallel to real different people switching back and forth. So, but with this article now, I have ironically like 5 times as much evidence to challenge skeptics to say, no, it's actually testable now. That line of argument doesn't work. To me, that's just a big deal.
So one of my basic questions, and let me know if you don't really have an answer for this. What would a universe with 5 times as much matter look like? I mean, it's hard for us to imagine dark matter because we really haven't clearly identified it. And Walmart after midnight. What would a universe with, like, would everything be 5 times more dense? Would gravity be 5 times stronger? I can't wrap my head around it. I don't know what that implies.
It's a really good question. I mean, yeah, I imagine that the hamburgers are 5 times as big at McDonald's over there, and it could be density, it could be more stuff, it's a good question. Go ahead, buddy.
I would think that that if it's a mirror universe, and even if it's a funhouse mirror universe, you're not going to have a human being and there it be an apple, or
Hmm?
Neutrons are still neutrons, and they have to place with molecules. And so there's a very sophisticated arrangement that would have to be broken down in energy expenditure, utilized, and then reformed. Somehow. I think it's going to be very similar to us. I think they may be just differences in distortion, like Doc said, and they would seem normal to them.
We're losing him.
If he
necessarily 5 pounds. An assumption. Equivalency exchange. And I think there might be a way, realistically, if that universe is there, although it could mimic us simultaneously because of the nature of it being a mirror universe and to have to exchange these neutrons real time, maybe there is some linear aspects of it.
We're getting some modem issues from you, buddy, over there.
Yeah.
Oh, darn it.
Let me...
Go ahead, Dr. Hein.
Nobody, it makes sense. He's talking about fundamental chemistry and subatomic principles would be similar, right? But I have an idea. I'm going to be starting a mirror universe remote viewing project from my YouTube channel. And I'm going to be sending out coordinates soon. I might as well announce it now. I've been working on it for a couple days. Wow. The only way we're going to get the information is to remote view it. And we're going to have remote viewers going over there to see what it's like and reporting back. So we'll have some firsthand data. And I'll be announcing it soon on YouTube. And all people will need to do is subscribe to my channel. I'll send out the coordinates. You can post a little message, on YouTube to your subscribers. We'll post some coordinates, and we'll see what we get. How about that? It's definitely a great question. I mean, what is this universe like? So here's the question, guys. What are we already having contact with this parallel universe, and we don't know it yet?
I would think
some of these UFOs are. Did someone else figure out a way to cross the wormhole and come over here?
Absolutely. And that's part of my question is, since our physical brains are part of this physical universe and neutrinos and all these other particles, I mean, the laws of physics apply to our physical brains as well. Yet somehow mysteriously our consciousness seems to be much more complex than the sum of its parts. You know what I mean? Like our consciousness seems to give us an experience that goes well beyond just synaptic gaps and electrical impulses and chemical balances. It seems like our overall experience of life transcends, I guess transcendent would be the word, transcends that physicality. But since we are physical beings in this universe, how would this exchange with another dimension affect our consciousness? And could that be the basis, or at least a key element of remote viewing, psychic abilities, or other phenomena that manifest that we call paranormal, which may be just simply explained by that?
What if it's a basic foundational aspect of consciousness in both sides? What if that other universe and that exchange is what is part of the structure of consciousness itself? I don't think it's going to be that vastly different. I think I may be speaking to me there, and that exchange between neutrons, maybe that's part of my subconscious and it's part of my subconscious, and we get gestalts from each other, and that may be a communication. That's notion sounds appealing to me, but it's so far out. But it fits a lot of the premises and a lot of the experiences of remote viewers, and I'm just wondering what else we could get useful out of it. What could we, could we exchange anything, Doc? Is there a difference in subatomic particles that we could get free energy or something? It's neutral here, but we send it there and it flips back. Thing.
Well, I suspect if this parallel mirror universe exists, and by the way, the most recent creation of Star Trek Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
On I believe CBS. I've been watching it on
CBS.
Actually a couple of years ago, but it's very good. Well, I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't seen it yet, but it's big time into a parallel mirror reality. You don't know this until the end of the first season. And boy, it's just a shocker. And here we have the scientific evidence. So someone posted a picture of the captain of the Discovery in mirror images. And New Scientist retweeted it because they said, hey, we're talking about mirror universes and here's the show. But let me give you specifically what scientists believe so far in terms of this exchange. Since Buddy asked this question, what is exactly getting exchanged? 1 out of 100 neutrons, according to this idea, is being shared. They're time-sharing neutrons that are going back and forth between our reality and the other one. So that would mean 1 out of every neutron in your body is disappearing, going over to this other universe and coming back.
Or does it send simultaneously to us as we send ours to them?
No, it said they're disappearing and coming back. But it's a good question. Is it
conservation of energy? It disappears?
Yes, it's spending energetically according to these measurements. See, when a neutron is outside of the nucleus, normally this, and a YouTube viewer asked me this, so I had to look into my basic physics again. And what I remembered from my class and reading is that the strong nuclear force keeps atomic particles, subatomic particles together. It's 137 times stronger than the electromagnetic force, which is magnetism, electricity. And it binds the neutron to the proton inside the nucleus. The electrons kind of orbit, so to speak. Now, when the neutron is outside the nucleus of an atom, it doesn't last very long. That's beta decay. That's the weak nuclear force. This is the force that actually generates ionizing radiation and all sorts of other things when it becomes destabilized, and it triggers other neutrons to destabilize, and you get a nuclear reaction. It only lasts about a little less than 15 seconds outside of the nucleus, and then it decays into the neutron decays and ejects an electron, and it decays and gives off energy. So what this article, the New Scientist article, the research suggests is that there's missing neutrons in our reality that are going somewhere else. They're not enough. And so if this would be true, they're here part of the time, they're going somewhere else, and then they're coming back. And when they did these experiments with the magnetic oscillations and the time change, they started wondering, is that little extra bit of magnetic energy kicking them off into the parallel reality, and then they're coming back? So we're already sharing neutrons. And if that is true, and it's a thought experiment, but I kind of like thought experiments. You don't have to take them seriously. And buddy, it's kind of like an RV session. When it's done, end session, and it's over. That's a thought experiment.
Yeah.
Einstein loved thought experiments, Goduncan experiments. We need to do a thought. What would it look like if we're sharing neutrons right now? Would we have some sort of communication going on with this other world? Would energy be exchanged? What's the nature of the interaction? And do the life forms over there have some of them figured out how to get over here? And I guess this is the $64 million question, Natasha and Buddy. Are these some of our UFOs from this parallel reality?
I would have to, I can't help but think that there's a possibility for sure. I mean, I personally, without a lot of evidence, just my observation and intuition and kind of looking at all the phenomena that I'm interested in and some of the things I deal with on the show. And, I've been kind of going on this interdimensional universe or multiverse concept anyway. I think that an interdimensional universe and interdimensional travel is one of the simplest and most straightforward explanations for the UFO phenomena and other paranormal phenomena that we may call ghosts or Bigfoot or whatever, that this slippage in between these dimensions can allow for this mystical, magical effect, at least on our side. But in reality, there are core scientific principles that can explain the phenomena.
It seems to me in a weird way that it's kind of it's kind of like a cheat a little bit. We make so many excuses for physics that we don't understand, and sometimes it's good to say we just don't understand. And this needs the kids of the next generation to come in and explore it for us,
Absolutely. If they continue to do experiments with this, and let's say it produces something, let's say that it's recreated over and over by different scientists, and so there starts to be more meat on the bone, so to speak, with this topic. Does this information stand to turn the standard model as we know it now on its head, or change it somehow?
I think, it's this whole model of, and Doc and I have discussions about this. It is fascinating, and I love these thought experiments, and I have less scientific authority than Doc does, so I appreciate his patience, and anyone who listens to a comedian babble about something as important as physics. But for me, the multiverse model, where at every event the universe recreates itself completely, and except for that one difference, and then every billions of seconds that every action happens, there's new whole universes springing into effect. And then as time passes, these universes get more and more complex. To me, that just seems like the opposite of the anthropic principle, where it is the way it is because it's this way. And the many worlds theory is like, heck, if you got enough, it don't matter because it's going to happen anyway. I would rather hone it down to something that seems more realistic, like this mirror universe. That makes sense to me. It's two to make one more solid, and one have more structure, and one seem more justified in its existence, rather than just one universe with all these different parameters, and some of them have missing ends. This ties up those ends for us, for symmetry more complete.
Doc, do you have a response for that?
Well, I got to say, first of all, the good news, Natasha, is you never need to apologize again for talking about parallel realities.
Boom.
This is just in 1 week for me, it's all changed because of this article. That's amazing. I mean, I've heard at the science meeting I was at, Natasha, last week when we started interacting, and then my internet got cut off. I didn't see your tweets, and we were like going at it, it just doesn't work inside buildings. And it was a little confusing. Anyway, the Society for Scientific Exploration at these meetings, and they've been very good to me. I presented about crop circles there in 2007, and what remote viewing tells us about UFOs and ETs in 2008. Russell Targ was even there, and he criticized my presentation.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
I didn't believe that Pat Price's remote viewing of those 4 sites around the world. He said there's no feedback for it, so it's not really in the realm of science. It's just speculation.
But you know what? Scientists want some evidence, and you can't blame him,
Of course not. But the title of the talk was What Remote Viewing Tells Us About ETs and UFOs. I didn't say it was true. It was just, what does it tell us? It's a whole nother lecture to verify it. It's just an introduction. People suggested it was mind reading and overlay, but I think we're seeing that this ET thing is coming on in a big way, or this UFO subject, if it turns out to be ET. But it has changed this 1 week. Even at the SSE meetings, people said this is just metaphysics. It's not testable. And our friend Richard Dolan, in his book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, towards the end of the book, he says some people have suggested multiverses, but there's no evidence for multiverses. And he dismisses it in one paragraph. One paragraph. That's all I got in Richard Dolan's book.
Richard Dolan.
You know how much...
I mean, wait a minute. So let me go back to your question, buddy. Is this symmetry started with Paul Dirac in the 1920s, the British physicist who proposed antimatter. Can you imagine antimatter in the 1920s, folks? I mean, so
there's no way you can imagine it.
We didn't really have the intellect. I mean,
antimatter. And now, it was Majorana that proposed that some particles could also be their own antiparticles simultaneously. Think about that. Buddy talking about yin and yang. That's the Majorana, this Italian physicist who kind of mysteriously disappeared in his 40s, but created the Majorana particle, which is now part of quantum computing, topological particles. It's a whole topological matter, insulators, a whole nother subject, but it's properties of systems, global properties that don't change very much, that are good, strong, good, strong particles that don't decohere very quickly. And Majorana suggested this in the 30s. But the point was, they discovered these. About a year or two ago, they discovered that Majorana particles evidence that particles had antimatter particles, and they could be their own antimatter particles. So
You know,
I think it changes very quickly. So this is the symmetry idea has been around for a long time.
yeah.
And I think we can see our own reality changing during this show right now. I believe we're the first people to talk about this on YouTube that I know about.
I just got
We're connecting things in ways that there's a thread of research all the way through Fritz Zwicky, who I call Fritz the Zwicky man. He was this Swiss scientist who saw these patterns of galaxies and said, there's not enough matter here to hold them together. I forget, it was University of Chicago, because I heard a lecture from a guy there. I believe it was at the University of Chicago or somewhere here in the U.S. And then Vera Rubin in the 1970s found the same thing as Fritz Zwicky. Well, now dark matter, even though we don't know what it is, it's accepted as something's out there. Too much matter. There's also, folks, forget dark matter. There's dark energy. That's another 68% of the universe. This mysterious force that's pushing the galaxies away. And by the way, dark energy is around us too. I've looked into this. It's not just way out there. Dark matter and dark energy are in our space. It's a pretty rare particle or whatever it is, but it's here too. So there's a lot of mysteries around. So to answer your question, Natasha, in a kind of a long-winded way, like I usually do, this could overturn the standard model. It's not just this. They're looking at this at CERN right now, a couple other particles related to neutrinos and things. It's sort of related to this area, which if these particles were discovered, it would really suggest that the standard model is incomplete.
If you could communicate with yourself in another universe, what would you try and say to yourself, or what would you want to explore?
Well, according to this article, and by the way, the scientist in Italy, so I just for fairness' sake, is Zurab Baraziani, University of L'Aquila. When you get multiple scientists working on these things and they're starting to agree on what measurements would be proof of this, that's when you're starting to make progress. That's when you're out of the realm of metaphysics and philosophy and you're in the realm of science. We're talking about testable hypotheses. This is what Buddy and I love. Something you can test with evidence, remote viewing, UFOs, all these subjects.
I think
we want evidence, and we're getting there. The article suggests whatever we have here in our universe, there's 5 times as much of it. In the other universe, 5 times as many species and life forms. We could be in the lonely universe, folks. They're empty here. This could be nothing compared to this.
So I want to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to hear the timeout. I just want to do some acknowledgement and of the chat room, and I look for some questions. Lady Zaga, I'm starting at the end and working my way back. I want to say hello to Richard Moonchild. And by the way, he's starting a new platform that is going to be a disruptive platform. And we're going to get into that. He's going to come on the show, but I'm going to be part of that. And we'll talk about that another time. Lady Zaga, boom. She said Richard Dolan has to sell some books. That's true, but I don't blame Richard for dismissing multiple universes because the science wasn't pointing that way. When I was admonishing him, I was tongue in cheek. Davey, my question to you is, who are you and why should I let you come on my show? Let's see. And I'm being a little snarky there, Davey. If you're have written a book or you have some knowledge on some topic that's relevant to the topic of this show, there's a chance. Yeah. So I'm not being just a total bitch to you. Let's see. Davey, I would love to speak from a viewer's, subscriber's point of view. Okay. Someone else had a question. I'm digging for it. Richard Moonchild's description is he's created a fringe server for all of us. He will come on the show and announce that and how to get it. Davey asks, is the mirror universe 2D or 3D perceived in a 2D plane like looking in a mirror? And I imagine that it would be 3-dimensional as this one is.
You wouldn't know more. It'd be 3D and it would be reversed, but you would know it's reversed because you live there. But when you saw our universe, you would think that one's reversed.
Right. Another question out of the from the professor. So would relativistic speed limit be an inverse opposite as well?
That's a good question. I would think no, but I don't know really. That's a wonderful question. What do you think?
These are really good questions. I'm not really qualified to answer.
I think a lot of
talking about it's sort of like what Buddy is saying. It could be very similar in some ways. Whatever it is, it's 5 times as much. And it could be in different ways. It's massive compared to our universe. Most of the matter is over there. But the gravity, the whole point of this is the gravity from that parallel reality appears to us as dark matter. This is the big take-home point of this. What we call dark matter here is their matter over there. And our matter is their dark matter because neutrons do interact gravitationally between these parallel realities. They're dark because they don't interact any other way so far. Wow. But they do interact gravitationally. So they would be wondering, why is our dark matter so scarce? It's only 1/5 of our matter. Where is the rest of it?
Does this solve that other shortage of there's some shortage of an element that they predicted was supposed to be much more prevalent in the universe, and they still haven't figured out why? Would you have any correlation to that?
Lithium. It does. It does. The article in the end goes into the lithium shortage, right? There should be more lithium. It's exactly right, buddy. This does answer. It's starting to answer a lot of really weird questions. It doesn't quite get into the fine structure constant and all these weird little constants. I shouldn't call them weird. They would hold us together. These fine settings that no one knows why are they so finely set, but it does start getting at why you have these kind of asymmetries in abundance of elements in the periodic table.
Wow. It'd be really interesting to flip you from this universe into that universe. But maybe that's happening anyway in some weird way. We don't even know. And I'm fascinated by the notion that if the neutrons are the same, if the matter's the same, and I'm me over there, that my consciousness in some capacity is being recreated there, albeit as it could be in a funhouse mirror fashion, slightly warped, or I could be the slightly warped version of them. But I'm starting to get this weird feeling that this exchange of neutrons within brains could account for some interesting possibilities.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's not just the neutrons. The neutrons, when they decay, become protons and they emit an electron. So it's the full range of particles that we're talking about. So you've got everything over there you need to have matter. And we really don't know. Are there mirror images of us? Because I just have to tell you, this is only one way that we could have parallel realities. This is the easiest one to understand in some ways because the other ones, and again, Rich Dolan and others, we can't blame them. There wasn't any evidence really a couple of years ago really to anything to go on. It was just really discussion. Even though Hugh Everett III did a great job mathematically showing that it was possible. And when someone asked him, this was the model Buddy was talking about at the beginning, the many worlds, where you're not that the universe is splitting. The universe is in this superposition of a wave function, and it's in state of all possibilities, and you're moving through all the possibilities. Even though you exist in all of them, you're only seeing one version at a time. That's the many worlds interpretation. You're splitting as you make decisions and do things. Other possibilities are generated. You're splitting to see what's already there. But that's very hard to comprehend in some ways, right? And someone asked you, a friend, do you believe that's really happening, that we're splitting? Because people said, I don't feel myself splitting. And he said, well, you don't feel yourself rotating around the sun either, but you're doing that. He said, I'm about 70% confident. So he wasn't even completely confident. It was a math model. And the other model I talked about recently, the many interacting worlds model, is a little different. It says all these parallel realities exist simultaneously. We talked about this in the other show. And Natasha, when you're alluding to Bigfoot and ghosts and bleed through, this is the model that says they do interact, not like the Hugh Everett model where they never interact again. This model says they interact a little bit through repulsive electron forces between realities. That model allows through bleed through, and that also deals with near infinite numbers of parallel realities. That also is kind of a mind stretch. So this one is the easiest one to start with, folks. It's just one parallel reality. It's like a mirror Spock and Kirk in Star Trek. It's one mirror universe. That doesn't mean the other ones aren't there. And I'm with you, Natasha, on this. When I look at the Bigfoot reports and so many witnesses I've talked to. I haven't written about Bigfoot, but I've talked to so many Bigfoot witnesses living here in Colorado, people who've seen it in various parts of the West. I know it's a real creature, but where does it go when you're not seeing it? People just don't see them around, and then they're here. They seem to disappear, and they show up and disappear. So are they multidimensional ghosts? You know, the Stanley Hotel up in Estes Park, you know, the basis for The Shining by Stephen King. Ghosts and things. And I was at a ghost conference there once. These are real phenomena. People do experience these things that are out of time. People that seem like they're dressed from the Civil War. You know, all these different cases when they're on driving in a road in South Carolina one night, and things that don't add up. And
residual hauntings.
Residual hauntings. And a third category we should mention here. People who see things that are no longer there, they go back with a friend and it's gone. Many cases of that. I've heard people talk about this at lectures when they've seen something and they told people, they said, that's not there anymore. That burned down in the 1920s or something. They go back, it's not there. This is bleed through from these parallel realities. So we're just talking about one type here. The main point, though, is from this week on, you no longer have to accept the argument. You don't have to back down that this is metaphysics, that this is just philosophy. Because the physicist I've been talking to here in Boulder says there's no way to test for this. There's no evidence. That's not true anymore. These guys at the University of L'Aquila in Italy, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is part of the Manhattan Project, by the way, big part.
Absolutely.
They say it's testable.
This is, to me, just another testament to the beauty and the magnificence and the constantly changing, wonders that I find in exploring the universe, and how God's, to me, God's majesty is constantly unfolding, and we could never fully grasp it. And I love when our heels get pulled out from under us, and we look skyward again and try and say, what the heck's going on? And we have to clean the slate and start anew. And it's wonderful to know that that's out there for us, and that we don't have to be like, oh, that's it, dead end. That's it, guys. We got it all. Let's work on the fine stuff now. It's wonderful to have these big, huge mysteries still.
And it's coming at a time where we're getting a lot of UAP, UFO disclosure. Yes. I don't know if you've seen Unidentified, but I personally think it's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen on TV. I have to say they did a great job. There's no BS. And it leaves you with a real sense of you don't know what's going on anymore, for real. Not a show that wraps things up at the end with an astronomer who says it was just a meteorite or swamp gas. There's none of that in this show. So we're at a time where society is changing, I believe, to accept that we live in a universe where we don't totally know what's going on. It's not just dark matter and dark energy. With astrophysicists have been keeping this to themselves. They know we only can explain 5% of the universe. 5%. The other 95%, all bets are off. It could be anything. Dark matter, dark energy, 95% of the universe. And they've known it's mysterious. But when they present themselves on these new shows to counter the UFO stuff, they say, oh, there could be so many other explanations. It could be ice crystals. It could be anomalous, readings in the bugs in the code. It could be neurological overload and all this BS. But now it's really changing. And I see this as another big piece that's fitting into place that's saying, you know what? We really don't know where we are anymore. We don't know where we are. We have this place called Earth. We don't know where it is. It's just like a Star Trek episode where they say, Captain, where are we? And, they go to the navigator, whoever it is, Chekhov, or Captain, I don't know where we are.
To me, it's another Galileo moment. It's another one of those Galileo moments or Copernican moments where you're like, we're not as special as one thought we were. And it's more dynamic. In fact, you're not only special, you're half as special, because you need the other half to be you. So you're half as special as you were before. And a constantly dynamically changing universe. We used to think the universe revolved around us. Now we couldn't have been more wrong. We couldn't have been more oppositely wrong. So we should keep very open minds about all of this stuff. And
absolutely. That kind of segues into my next question. Even though people really aren't talking too much about this, and it's not just any topic that, like, I talked about this last week, but I went to the limits of my ability to really talk about it.
I thought you were great.
I needed people who were smarter than me to come on and talk about this. That's why I'm glad you're both here. So are we, in spite of the fact that no one is really, I think scientists are probably making a big deal of this. There's probably a small group of people that are really thinking about this, and it's affecting their thinking on these matters. But in terms of a popular answer, in terms of the general public, this is kind of like a non-event. But will scientists and maybe other people 20 years from now, 50 years from now, look back at this moment and say that's when the door opened, and now 50 years from now or 20 years from now even, that the technology is so much more advanced, or we have some kind of free energy technological breakthrough that they're going to look back and see this time and this discovery as the very beginning of what might be an incredibly revolutionary change in technology that will affect the future?
I don't think it'll be this specific, but I think this time period. We just had LIGOs that confirmed gravity waves, which essentially is gravitons. We have indications, and this is some research going on, that we're discovering a new field out there, and it's being quantified. We've just found out that the universe takes the double mirror universe in order to make one universe kind of stable, and it's through a neutron positron exchange. We're completely reinventing our perspective, and I think that's healthy. You shouldn't get too you should always have an open mind, and Doc always talks about exciting the young people and us cocky adults trying to unlearn a little bit, because that's actually probably more accurate than what we really believe right now. Things constantly flip and change, and the whole understanding inverts completely. So it's exciting, and I think we should spread that excitement to the young people. We don't have enough female scientists, we don't have enough minority scientists, and everyone can explore the universe. I mean, come on, there's no excuse. So we need in the future more scientists, definitely.
And putting this in historical, that's true, buddy. Because it's often healthy to admit you don't know what's going on than having this false confidence, which I think science has presented itself as having for a while. But the reason it's done that is, ever since the Cold War ended, it's been repressive physics. There have been entire books written about how repressive physics has been, to physicists who've attempted to have this discussion that we're having right now. Do you realize even having this discussion in the time of Giordano Bruno could have gotten you burned at the stake, right? Yes. And in recent times, since the Cold War and a kind of repressive national security state, physicists have been basically told to shut up and calculate. These are called, what we're talking about here is foundations, physics foundations. And that's been a career killer for people. They've been told, don't talk about this, just calculate, find a little sub area and specialize in that. Don't ask the big questions. And this is kind of like a return to the bigger questions. And if these physicists are doing it without fear, even at a government national laboratory, that says a lot to me right there. Don't you think? Because people have lost their jobs and had their careers ended in physics because of conversations like we're having now. The fact that we can have it, and we're not in a department or in a job track that it would affect us. But that's you in the parallel universe, isn't it, buddy? I see that with degree. I don't hear you, but I see you. But this is the thing. It's this means that the fear has gone away of asking the deeper questions, and it opens the doors to these other subjects you've raised, Natasha. Bigfoot. A lot of people have seen it. Lots and lots of people have seen Bigfoot. You've talked to them. I've talked to them. It's real.
I'm one of them.
Ghosts,
yes.
You're one of them. I'd love to hear it. Ghosts. From so many credible ghost stories. And instead of saying, let's not talk about it, let's just push it back into the closet. Why not talk about it? We're talking about Navy personnel who've had sightings on the USS Roosevelt and Nimitz and Princeton, these different carrier groups. Kevin Day told me in his interview, he wrote a book about it called The Seer in 2008, just to document his experience on the Princeton, because he didn't think people would believe him. And then for a long time, they were laughed at when they talked about it. Dave Fravor said that when he came back into the CIC room where they get debriefed after his encounter with TikTok, the guys had put on aluminum foil, tinfoil hats and were making jokes. Even the so-called Admiral Wilson leak document, whatever that is, he says in there, they were it would affect my career. People were snickering. I'm sure that was true. I mean, Admiral Wilson's a real person. We know Greer, briefed him and all this. I'm sure he said something like that. So this has been, people have been afraid to talk about alternative realities and alternative science facts. And as Buddy mentioned a few moments ago, you take people like Galileo, before him, Copernicus, to propose alternatives. And Galileo, for talking about what we're talking about here, was put under house arrest for like a decade or something at the end of his life for proposing that Copernicus could have been right, that basically the geocentric view might be flawed. So
now the Vatican has observatories.
So this to me is progress. Just the fact that we're talking about it. Let's repeat, we can't guarantee that this parallel reality really exists. It's just a math model right now. It fits the data. Some people, I'm sure other explanations could be there, but the fact that it's being taken seriously, it being discussed as a real possibility, to me is a huge leap forward for all of us.
Isn't Oak Ridge a government lab? So it's essentially the thing.
Absolutely, yes.
That would have to have
part of the Manhattan Project.
Have a higher level of evidentiary review, or no, because it's government?
I would imagine so. I mean, it's you're working with something that has the Manhattan Project legacy behind it, which is practical science. Even if it's super explosive, powerful bombs, that's what they do. And they did it well.
That's why I think that's why it's a big deal. I didn't mean to step on you, Dr.
No, you're right. It's practical.
That's why I think it's such a big deal, because it's Oak Ridge National Laboratory. This is coming from inside of a national laboratory. Excuse me. That's probably one of the most important laboratories that we have, at least one that's on the grid. And so the fact that they would admit this, even at this preliminary stage, I think it's huge. I think that we're going to find that this is the beginning. I think will be the next level, at least in part, of scientific investigation. There are other areas, of course, artificial intelligence, free energy, so on and so forth. I think that will have other implications, but I think this is an important find, and the fact that it's coming out of a national laboratory, I think, speaks volumes. At the same time that we're getting this military evidence of UAPs.
Right. I think it goes
falling fast. I mean, these technologies are going to come on fast and furious. From, like Doc loves to talk about, the reality that cold fusion is here, and anti-gravity is here, and these other incredible technologies are here, and bigger government structures, but they haven't trickled down to the people yet. And boy, I can't wait till we get trickled on.
So as we're winding up, we're down to I'm going to try to keep this at a tight hour. It's a dense topic, and I feel like we're probably not going to carry an audience too long with this, unless they were scientists themselves. But and I don't want to sell the audience short, but this is like super dense information. Could you each take a turn and tell us what you're working on right now, or what projects you have coming up, or appearances, and how the audience can get access to your work, your YouTube channels, so on and so forth?
That's really sweet of you. Thank you so much. Doctor and I work together on Reality's Edge. We work together on a lot of things. We're putting together different models of this phenomena, and I've been started a model and doing research with different research groups, and really for the first time ever in phenomenology, Doc can tell you that we've come up with a real angle and began the experimentation for the first time ever to get real science, real metrics from the phenomena itself. And I'm surprised it hasn't been done before, but it required some previous research to get here. So I'm just exploring and researching and having so much fun doing it. And I hope to make some tiny contribution to this whole picture if I'm so blessed.
Yes. Oh, wow.
You can see my calls, YouTube. That's it.
We, Buddy and I talk all the time about these topics, and it's what keeps us going. I've got my crop circle tour coming up in July in the UK, which is another aspect of this. I've often wondered whether some sort of dark energy is involved from these very strange electromagnetic phenomena we see repeatedly. And, when I put up a video about it a couple of days ago on my YouTube channel, Fractal Friend, people said, hey, I had my batteries go out around Avebury too in my camera. So it's great to have more evidence coming forward. I recently did some work with a TV channel in the Stevensville area last week. That show will be out in the fall. I can't really say anything more about it, but I'll be happy to come back and tell you everything about this when it shows on TV in the fall.
Awesome.
And thank you again for having an open mind, for having us here. And this is a great topic. And thanks for the excellent questions from viewers tonight.
Yeah, no, actually, thank you very much for everyone that was in the chat room. Out of Mind, Lady Zaga, I'm just scrolling through here. I know that there's some other shows going on right now, and it's kind of where there's getting to be a lot of competition on the weekends here for viewers. But I was one of the first to latch on to Fridays and Saturdays, so I'm going to stick with that. But once again, to the viewers, please like and subscribe and share this video. I appreciate you being here. You could be doing something else with your time, but you chose to spend your time with us, and I appreciate that. And I love you for it in kind of a generic, non-personal way that I can love you and not know you. But I've loved a lot of people I didn't know. But thank you so much for being here. Tomorrow night, CW Chanter, BB from the BB blog, and I'm going to bring in someone else to throw on the panel. We'll see who it is. Hell, I don't even know. I've been trying to scrounge around all day and find another person for this panel. But we'll get down in the dirt tomorrow on the Corey Good, Jordan Sather, all that crap. We'll get into it tomorrow. Thank you for being here, Mysterious Forces Live. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone. Have a good Saturday. Be safe out there. Bye. Boom.